Right. Hello, everybody. Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Myself and the Employee Engagement Committee, which if you've ever are currently a part of, have been a part of, raise your hand. Give them a round of applause. Thank them for their help with this as well. Couldn't do it without you guys. We're extremely excited to have our first and hopefully open the door for many, many more lunch and learn. And we have Dr. Dent, who's with us today. He's a professor at FGCU. I don't want to mess this up, so I can read it. And he's the Uncommon Friends Endowed Chair of Ethics at the College of Business University. I'm just going to give you a quick little background on his career, and then I'll let him take over. He began his career with IBM and was a corporate vice president before earning his PhD. He's won prominent awards in teaching, scholarship, and service. He's a board-certified coach, and most of the consulting work is now executive coaching. Today, Dr. Dent will be focusing on the topic of aligning management and employee expectations for better results and happier people. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Dent.
Thank you to the committee for putting all this together. I really think that we ought to change things up. So why don't we all grab a mat and we'll get this Zumba class going. Looks like you all do a lot of fun things in this room. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's my third year at Florida Gulf Coast University. How many FGCU grads do we have out there? A lot of people. Really glad to see that. I came to know about your company through Bethany, and she's given my students an opportunity to come study you all. So some of you may have spent time with our students being interviewed by them. So thank you so much for doing that. And it's just been a pleasure and privilege to learn more about your company. What I thought I would talk about today, I guess that's a pretty long title, but basically I want to share with you what I think is the most important learning of my now 36-year career. As in the introduction, I started off as a computer scientist with IBM. I've worked as a corporate vice president. I've been a business school dean. Been a professor now. And so I think this is the most important aspect of organizational life that I'd like to share with you all today. And basically, let's go to the next slide there, please. There we go. All right. Basically, what this model has to do with is that we're all walking around with expectations and assumptions in our minds about what's going to happen when we interact with other people. And every one of you is walking around with expectations and assumptions in your mind, and most of the time there's good alignment about those expectations and assumptions. But too often the alignment is not perfect. And so this model that I'm going to share with you is sometimes called the psychological contract. The psychological because we're trying to compare what's in my mind with what's in your mind in kind of a contract, because we both walk off working as if the assumptions that I hold are the same ones that you hold, and it turns out that's not sometimes the case. And as I said, I think this is the biggest reason why we have disconnects at work. Everybody, for the most part, has done a good job of hiring good people. So everyone who comes to work here today is well-intentioned in what you want to do, and yet you're probably going to have something go wrong with a coworker, if not today, sometime this week, or maybe with a client. But something will just be a little bit off. And I think the reason is because we have not done enough sharing, or the fancy language is articulating the psychological contract. We haven't done enough to make explicit as many of the important expectations and assumptions that we hold in our minds. So the way that I often introduce this concept is with the simplest example that's ever occurred to me. And this involves taking out the trash. So I have 5 children. 4 of them are a little bit lazy. Unfortunately, this is being recorded, so they may see this. So I'm not going to call. Each of them will get to think they weren't the lazy one. But one of them is not lazy. He's a good hard worker, enthusiastic, eager, likes to do things with me. likes to be praised. You know, I could say to him, I'm going to have to make up a name now. I could say to him, Tom, this weekend, you and I, we're going to clean the tile in the bathroom. We're going to get that grout looking better with toothbrushes. And he'd be, yeah, Dad, let's do that. So I could say to him, let's say he's only 5 years old. Today he's older. When he was 5, I could say, Dominic. He'd say, sure, Dad. And he would go off and he would do what I asked him to. And when he came back in, he would say, took out the trash, Dad. And, you know, he'd start off a high five, so I'd give him a high five, and, you know, he'd be pleased about that. But what I discovered is that when I use a simple phrase, like you take out the trash, I actually have about a dozen assumptions or expectations in what that simple phrase means. So if there's a dozen in taking out the trash, how many expectations and assumptions are there built into something like, hey, would you finish up the monthly report for this client? There might be 50 in that one, or 150 expectations and assumptions in that simple request that a manager might make, right? So I'm going to walk you through the trash ones, and let's see what it looks like to see these particular assumptions around taking out the trash. So I'm going to turn it over to a video here, real short video clip. If you haven't seen it, there's, not this one, but the other one, there's a TV show out. I just learned about the show called The Good Place. An ethics. I didn't get the casting call. TV show together, but now you're going to see me, and you're going to wonder why I wasn't casted for that example. Please. So here are the hold about taking. So first you'll open up, pull out the trash like ours, three pieces receptacle. Also, then you will take the liner up and tie it with whatever twist tie or whatever closure device that it came with. Next, you will go outside. You will open up the outdoor trash lid. You will toss the bag in. You'll close the outdoor trash lid. Then you'll come back inside. And you will find a new liner. And then, this one took me especially long to realize, you actually have to make sure you fluff it out all the way, because if you don't, it can act like a trampoline, and the first piece of trash will just bounce off the top. Put the new liner in, put the whole receptacle back under the sink, and close the cabinet door. So if I asked my son, the 5-year-old, to take out the trash, I realized I actually have all of those expectations and assumptions in what he would.
Back end better than ever. The program,
So sorry. Apologize.
But what if it's a rainy day like today, and 30 minutes after asking him to take out the trash, I look outside and I see the outdoor trash can and the lid is open. And so now the trash can is filling up with water. Or what if a few minutes later I'm eating a banana, and I get up and I throw out the peel, and I hear it plunk because it hits the bottom of the receptacle, and I can tell that there was no new liner put back in there. So unfortunately, most parent-child examples don't translate well to the workplace. But believe it or not, I do use this even in executive coaching with CEOs because it's such a great example. Typically, if we miss one assumption, in this case of taking out the trash, maybe he got 11 out of 12 right, but he forgot one, or just didn't do one part of it. What does a manager typically conclude when you get one assumption out of alignment? Unfortunately, you all can help me fill in the phrase for this. A lot of times the manager will say, if I want it done right, I would have had to do what? Do it myself, right? That's one of the primary conclusions that a lot of people come to. The second primary conclusion is that the employee doesn't have the skills. You know, I thought they were skilled enough to do this. I thought they were ready for this, that they were going to pull this off. And you know, that's another conclusion that people quickly jump to. And then the third one is, you know, something about work ethic. I thought their standards were high enough. You know, I thought they had the right attitude or were motivated or what have you. And I love that trash taken out example because it's a great illustration of how none of those is actually the reason why he may have done one assumption that was different from what I expected, right? Because he clearly, even though he was 5 years old, I didn't have to do it. He was fully capable of doing it. He clearly had the skills to do it, and he had a good attitude. He had a good work ethic. You know, it wasn't anything to do with standards or anything along those lines. So what is the issue? The issue is I had 12 expectations or assumptions in my mind, and I had never clearly, fully articulated them with him. And so that's going to be the primary message that I would like to offer to you all today is there's no one that I haven't worked with yet who has probably been doing this as adequately as they should. We probably have to articulate even more than we think we ought to. And sometimes people say to me, well, that feels a little bit like I'm micromanaging someone. And that's not the message of this at all. It's about micromanaging. But it's being clear about expectations and assumptions. And you need to be clear only to the extent that you're talking about something that if they did it wrong, it would be a problem. So that doesn't put you into the realm of micromanagement, I don't think. So this sometimes, as I mentioned, is called the pinch model. And that I think is for a couple of reasons. The way this fancy model looks is you kind of start off, you share information ahead of time. You know, some of this we're doing completely implicitly, but now after today, hopefully you all will be doing this more explicitly. So you get role clarity with someone, and then off you go. You're working, you have a stable work relationship, and then all of a sudden, because life is the way it is, you're almost certainly going to encounter what are called some pinch points in life. Now, pinch points arise primarily for one of two reasons. One is that something came up, or an expectation surfaced that I forgot to talk about to begin with. And those often are clued into us when we realize, oh, I never thought someone would have done it that way, or why would they have forgotten to do this? Or, when we realize something's off, that's when we realize there was an assumption or expectation that I held that I forgot to talk about at the outset. So if that's the case, then hopefully you can just redirect back to altering that. And I'll give you some examples of this in a moment. And then the second reason that these pinch points come up is that someone did in fact have an explicit expectation and didn't follow through on that. And so, that becomes a leadership coaching opportunity. And if it happens too often, then maybe your personnel policies around what to do around the lack of performance might kick in. But basically, the other reason it's called a pinch model is because it really recommends that you surface the disconnect as soon as it happens. So that maybe it just feels like a little pinch instead of what we too often do is we wait till something has gotten really bad and feel like, okay, now I've got to say something. So I remember my very first job when I was working for IBM, I was working all kinds of crazy hours and living by myself and rented apartment, hardly any furniture or anything. And so, I would come home from work sometimes really late at night, 10 or 11. And, I have these big size 14 shoes that I have to wear. And so I guess it was my habit to, at night just chuck my work shoes, my heavy shoes into the closet. And, to think twice about it, went to bed. And a couple months after I lived there was a knock at my door, and there was a woman standing there, and she started basically screaming at me about how every night, late at night, there's loud noise that comes from your apartment, and I had never laid eyes on this person before in my life. And understandably, she was quite upset, but it would have been a totally different conversation if first or second or third time it happened, she came up and knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I'm your neighbor right underneath you, Sharon, and I'm normally in bed by 9:30, but I hear a loud noise, upstairs every night later than that." And I said, "Oh, that's probably me checking my shoes, and I don't have to do that. I wasn't aware that it was causing any problem for you." So the pinch model also means bring it up when it's just a little pinch, so that you can ask about it in a way that doesn't put the other person on the defensive, doesn't make them feel bad. So if you have, let's say you're a manager and you have all your direct reports email you a status report to work on Friday, and Monday morning comes around and you're looking for the status reports and you realize one of them is missing from one of your direct reports. So this model would suggest try to reach out to them right away and just say, and I try to be as tactful as possible. Hey, I was going through my email, didn't see the status report that you emailed me on Friday, and I'd say something diplomatic like, well, maybe the email server was down over the weekend, but help me understand where that particular status report is. And some people say, oh, that sounds mealy mouthed or wishy-washy. I mean, to me, it's very direct, right? I've made the very clear point that your status report is supposed to be in my inbox when I read it Monday morning. It's not there. But I did it in a way that's sort of diplomatic and open and, allows them to engage rather than feeling punished. So they may say, well, I went home early on Friday. I thought I was going to do it when I got here and give it to you by about noon today. And then maybe that employee didn't realize when you aggregate all those results and then you go to a meeting at 10 o'clock with your boss. And so you have to have that information in order to give a good report at 10 o'clock, but maybe you hadn't really made that detail clear about the importance of that Friday report. So now you clarify that, and you bring it back into a new expectation or assumption. And you say, well, if you go home sick, and I'm glad you're feeling better, if you go home sick, you need to let someone else know who can prepare the report, or let me know so I can prepare it, because that information is really important because we take it to a meeting at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. So that's kind of how this whole process works. And then what you don't want is if you just let it fester, then you get over here to what's called a crunch point. And that's when people get upset. That's when you have a neighbor below you screaming at you. People are frustrated. People might leave jobs because things are just too much out of alignment and they've been allowed to fester. Too often, people will say, well, they were late with the report this one time. It probably will never happen again. I don't want to say anything. And then it happens a second time, maybe not the next week, but 2 weeks after that. And then it happens again 3 weeks after that. And so now, you've got egg on your face because Monday mornings you're going to this meeting with inadequate data. Where if you just deal with it when it's a tiny pinch, just to bring it up. The person may have a perfectly rational explanation for it. It could be that the email server was down and the email was sent and is not yet in your inbox. So this is kind of the model as it flows. Let me give you some examples of how to put this into practice. Let's use the example of delegation, because I think it's a model that can be widely applied for communication, for conflict, for delegation, for just a whole host of interactions that two or more human beings have with each other. So let's say that I'll be the manager, and Samantha, maybe if you don't mind, you'd be my subordinate for a few minutes here. And so I've called Samantha into my office, and she knows that it's going to be to discuss her taking on a project that's larger in scope than anything I've ever asked her to do before, right? So she knows that's the purpose of the meeting. She's going to come to my office. And so she comes in, and what I typically do, ideally, if you're face-to-face with people, or if you're doing it virtually, like a WebEx, if possible, have that visual interaction with each other. But I'm old-fashioned. I'll have an old clipboard or something like that, and say, hey, Samantha, I'm so excited. You've been doing a great job. You're going to take over the penalty project. And then you start to go through what are some of the expectations and assumptions about this, right? So some of them are pretty clear and obvious. There's going to be schedules to be met. There are going to be budgets to be met. There are going to be other milestones of various sorts, right? So most of that we're pretty clear on. And, for a good amount of work, we're in alignment with each other on expectations and assumptions, right? And we've worked together extensively. We have a lot of shared experience, so the alignment is largely there. But to the degree that you can find out what is that one that we're likely to maybe have expectations about. And we're living in a world today where we've had people that come from different countries, and it's not different countries, from different states or different parts of states. They've had different family experiences. We've had different educational experiences. So there's far less probably today that we can take for granted when it comes to expectations and assumptions about things than we might have been able to take 30 years ago or so. So, a neat thing about this too is as you inquire of people the share expectations and assumptions, you kind of learn more about them, right? And you learn, I had a silly one where I grew up in Boca Raton, it's my hometown, and I didn't know anyone when I was a kid. Everyone I knew put salt on watermelon and ate it raw. I went up to college and put salt on a piece of watermelon and had someone looking at me like I was nuts. And then I found out there were people in the world that actually didn't put salt on watermelon. I mean, that's a silly example, right? But it's interesting what we take for granted, that they're so deeply ingrained in here. So I'll be writing this down. You've got a milestone of October 31st. You've got to have it all done, Samantha. You got some interim milestones. You got budget. And you're actually going to have two people sort of report to you on a half-time basis. I know you've never had two people report to you before, but that's going to be part of this assignment. You actually are going to get some administrative support. I'm going to arrange for someone to support you about 10 hours a week. And you're going to have to, I know you've never worked with Juanita over in procurement, so I'm going to introduce you to her. You've got a whole new aspect of the work that you haven't done before. And, whatever, I'm making all this stuff up, right? But you write down whatever the expectations and assumptions are. And then I typically wait till the next day. I don't know why I always do, but I wait till the next day. And then I follow up with an email. I say, Samantha, it was great talking with you yesterday. As October 3rd. Look. I'm going administrative. Two-way street. And then I send like that, and I always put at the bottom, if you think I captured anything here differently than we discussed yesterday, please let me know. Never had one to come back. And the beauty of that now is it also turns the tables around accountability. Some people, when they're in managerial, project management, or other accountability roles, they really hate to be the bad guy. Hate to be the person that has to, call somebody on the carpet for having done something wrong. So the beauty of this is I've got an email, and if we're going to meet weekly to kind of go over status, I print the email out, we sit down between us if we're face-to-face, and we just go through it. And let's say there's something on there that, and let's say there was something on there where she fell short. Well, I don't even have to say anything. It's sitting there in black and white. She's supposed to have something done by March 15th, and here it is, whatever today is, March 18th, 19th, and she didn't do it. So it's sitting right there. I don't have to bring it up. I don't have to make a big deal about it. I don't have to feel like I'm the heavy. So it really kind of shifts the whole dynamic around accountability as well. Now let me ask you all this. Another way that it's really helpful, if you were that person being called in and I was going to give you a project larger in scope than your manager was than you'd ever undertaken before, are you likely to ask a lot of questions in that initial conversation or not many questions? Let's do a quick show of hands. How many people think a lot of questions? All right. How many people think not so many questions? All right. Now, isn't that good? See, human beings, we're very different. We have different expectations and different assumptions. And there are people that will do both, right? The whole range, from 1,000 questions to no questions. There's going to be people that are somewhere on that spectrum. It turns out the research suggests, actually, that more people are going to tend toward the fewer questions side. Now, those of you that said fewer questions, what was your thought process for why that would be the case? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, good, because you want, if you had to ask the boss, then maybe that doesn't come across as positively as if you could figure it out on your own, right? And so that is, I think, one of the key reasons is, if you think about it, the way the meeting's been set up, you're going to be asked to take on a project larger in scope than you've ever dealt with before. So there's a lot of what we call positive meta messages being sent to you. What kind of messages has the manager sent to you just by arranging that meeting without saying anything? They trust you. They think you have the skills. They think you're ready to take on larger scope. All these really positive messages. On average, people don't want to ask too many questions at first because they're fearful that if I ask too many questions, I'm going to start to undermine. The boss is going to think, well, maybe she's not quite ready for this yet. Maybe she needs more training. Maybe, whatever. So the average person, again, those of you who said a lot, you are correct. You're that person that would do that. And that's probably a good thing because, again, trying to be explicit, both not only when we're in maybe a higher ranked position, but if you're in the lower ranked position, asking about it is really helpful too, so that way you're always in alignment with your boss. But the average person is not going to ask as many as they should because they don't want to undermine that confidence, that trust. So, we say, yes, I'm on it, you can count on me, I'm all over this, thank you for the opportunity, go out in the hallway and say, so, the manager, even, I'm going to talk about some examples where it's between peers, like in this gift-giving one. But the manager, I say, always has the responsibility for making sure that both things have happened. The manager shares his or her expectations and inquires of the other person about his or her expectations. So the manager, if the employee doesn't ask enough questions, the manager should ask some questions that tease that information out. The manager should say, well, you've never had two people report with you before. What do you think it's going to be like to manage two people? How often would you like to meet with me just to kind of brainstorm this project and how things are going with you? So you start asking the questions to tease the expectations and assumptions that they hold out of them. So all of that is going to increase alignment. The second example I'll share with you is one of the things I've recommended with all of my consulting clients is that they essentially go through this process when they're hiring anyone. I would say anyone, but particularly at a strategic level, because if you hire someone at a more senior level that doesn't work out, it's incredibly expensive. So I actually employed this myself when I took a couple of jobs. I've known about this for maybe 15 years or so. Came to Florida Gulf Coast 3 years ago. And so let's say I was the dean of the business school in the University of North Carolina system, and use that job as an example. So, we all, when we're taking jobs, the key things we want to know about are what? The salary, right? That's big, right? The salary, the benefits, all those kinds of things are big, and that's what we focus on. But they typically are contractual. Usually you'll get something in writing that spells all that out. So you absolutely want that, and that's absolutely key. But there's so many things that aren't contractual that will likely play a role in whether or not you're satisfied with this job, and they're satisfied with you. And for those of you that are younger in the room, I think it increases as you get older. There are other factors that just become, your whole work-family balance if you start to have families and children, and just, a whole bunch of other factors, taking care of elderly parents, and all these things start to play a role. So when I became dean of the business school, it occurred to me, and I'll give you a silly example to start with. The person that directed my dissertation, he went to another university and took an endowed chair professorship. So it turned out that job had been worked out just between the president and him, pretty much. And so when he showed up for work, it came to business school and met the dean the first day, and the dean was surprised he was going to be there. They had no office for him. I used to wonder, how can you not have an office for somebody? Then I became a dean and realized, in a growing institution, space is at a premium. You can't stick somebody in an endowed chair, in a closet, so to speak. So I put down, the first thing in the letter is, I will have an office. In this case, the dean's office was clearly identified and so forth. But the point is, you can't put too many things down because what my clients say is they'll look through a letter and say 80% of them say, of course, of course, of course, of course, of course. But 20% of them, you look at it and you say, well, maybe it isn't that they got it wrong, but we need to talk a little bit more about this. So let me give you some examples. In my case, I have 5 children, as I mentioned. At the time I became dean, the youngest ones were 2, 4, and 6 years old. So I put in the letter that I knew as a dean we're probably on campus about 3 nights a week, probably one weekend evening for some kind of alumni event or fundraiser or student competition or something like that, and then a couple nights during the week. So I put in the letter, if I don't have to be on campus at night, then my expectation is I'll actually be home in time to have dinner with my family. And my wife is a stay-home mother, and kind of the way she works things, 2-year-old goes to bed about 8 o'clock, so if you back up, bath time, story time, and all that, we're eating dinner at 5:30. So, I could be leaving the office at 5 o'clock, and in some jobs that could be perfectly acceptable. So most dean jobs are probably not acceptable, but I wanted to kind of test that out, so I put that in the letter. Turns out in that case it was no problem whatsoever. But, I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and most jobs, you stayed a lot later than that. And so if your boss thought that he or she could reach you at 6:15 at your desk and, you're blown out at 5, that's a huge disconnect right off the bat, right? Another one was just, even as a dean, you still need to be an active scholar. So if the university didn't have the databases you needed or, whatever tools you needed for your scholarship, don't take that granted. You should ask and make sure and say, this is an expectation of mine. I'll give you a couple that I really blew. One of them was I put that I expected what my travel would likely be. Nights spent away from home, traveling. Well, I moved to a more rural part of North Carolina. I was used to Washington, D.C. Is there anyone I need to talk to? I just found a subway and rode for a stop or two. You go to a more rural area, and the expert that you need to talk to doesn't live within 200 miles. So so I blew that one, right? When it came to travel expectations, I completely got that wrong. So I reached a pinpoint, right? A pinch point. The travel was far more than I thought it was going to be. So I don't think I have it on this particular version of the graph, but there's another outcome from a pinch point, and that's what I call the stuff it. So I could have said, travel way higher than I thought it was going to be. I'm back on the job market. This is not what I signed up for. But in that case, I adjusted my own assumption and just did the travel. So I stuffed it. So that's a reasonable outcome from a pinch point sometimes. But so I blew that one. I'll tell you a couple others that I blew. That one at least I made explicit. It just turned out to be different than I thought. Let me tell you about a couple that I blew because I didn't make them explicit. One of them was I assumed, right? There's that famous word, assumed, that if you were involved with the university at all, that there was some kind of dependent tuition benefit. Now, things have changed. I didn't expect that my kids would be able to have a free ride if they went to that university, but I thought there would be something. Well, it turned out nothing. So, again, that could have been a pinch point for me. I could say, what? I left George Washington University where my kids, I didn't realize it when I worked there, most expensive tuition in the United States. The benefit that I would have gotten would have been worth literally over $200,000. So I left that benefit for zero. But my point is that I assumed it, right? I took it for granted. To me, university employment and dependent tuition benefit were synonymous. Guess what? They're not. They are. Before the Gulf Coast, my kids get $2. So you get a little bit of a benefit here. And that's kind of what I expected. But I hope you take my point. My main point is that I didn't even think in my head it was a fact. It turned out in life it wasn't a fact. And so that's what we have to do. I can sit here and tell you all, hey, make explicit all of your assumptions and expectations, but guess what? It's not easy to do because they're stuck in there. A lot of them are really, really deep in there. So let me give you an example of a really deep one. My wife and I have been married 33 years. We were married in November, and we're both Christians, and we celebrate Christmas as a holiday. And we, came back from our honeymoon after Thanksgiving. I was young. We were both young at that time. And Christmas is right around the corner, right? And so then you start doing your Christmas cards, buying presents, and things like that. Now, what I'm about to tell you took me 2 years to figure out. So it's going to sound obvious to you when I say it, but it wasn't obvious to us as we lived through it. So all of a sudden, we're starting to do Christmas gifts, and I see my wife writing checks for, the way her family did things. She had 3 siblings. The way they did things is they kind of went in for large Christmas gifts, but they would be practical things, like a dishwasher. So maybe our share, so she and her mother and 2 other siblings would go in, $50 a piece or $60 a piece, whatever it is, for a dishwasher for that. And so, she's writing checks 50 for this one, 60 for this one, 50 for this one. And in my mind, which I've never made explicit, but my implicit assumption was our entire Christmas budget was maybe like $50. I'm seeing these checks. These checks are getting written fast and furiously. And so we both spent the first 2 Christmases kind of miserable with each other. And so let me tell you about some of the deeply held assumptions that we had that were quite different. So I grew up in a home that was fairly well off. And so Christmas was more, the commercial part of Christmas was really downplayed. So my mother would find a gift for you that probably cost about $30. And you know what I got for my birthday recently? Check for $30. I got to explain inflation to her. She doesn't have that concept yet. $30 bought, when I was a child, $30 bought something. But it's about $30 was anything above that would have been some. And often there would be something homemade. And my mother also she really wanted you to be surprised on Christmas Day. So my brother and sister and I, if we were watching TV and a commercial for some toy came out and we really wanted that toy, we'd have to pretend, I'm not paying much attention to this at all. But we got all excited about it and said, like nowadays, kids put lists together for Santa Claus. If we ever put a list together, we definitely weren't getting anything on that list because you wouldn't be surprised. So she worked really hard to find one thing for us that made us surprised. And the commercial part of it was really bad. So that's one person's tradition around Christmas. The other person we get married to grew up in less well-off surroundings. So I think for that reason, Christmas was the one time a year that kind of was big. And again, it was always for practical purposes, but that was when they spent a lot of money on gifts. Now, if you're getting a gift and it's a dishwasher, that's not a surprise gift on Christmas Day, right? You want to know you probably want to pick it out. You want to know the color. You want to make sure it fits in the space that you have in your kitchen, right? So in my wife's house on Christmas Day, no surprises, right? Everything was choreographed ahead of time. It was all organized. It was all, larger gifts and so forth. And my house, the complete opposite. Christmas Day, total surprise, and much, much smaller gifts. And so, it was very strange kind of living through that. Like I said, to you all it probably sounds obvious. Why didn't you figure that out in 10 minutes with each other? But, both of us were working. We didn't have children. It wasn't a money issue for me, but just, it changed the whole way that the holiday was celebrated. A large dollar amount. And that sort of thing. So I offer that example by way of saying that a lot of our expectations and assumptions, even in the workplace, they're in here deep. You're going to have to dig them out with a I don't know what, scalpel or something, because if I just told you right now to write down all of your expectations and assumptions about the project that you're working on with your closest coworker, you'd get 80% of them in 10 minutes. But the next 20%, the main way to find something out is when your expectation is not met. And then it becomes crystal clear to you that you held some kind of expectation. Right? Let me do another example or so here. Roommates or any kind of co-workers sharing an office or any of these kinds of things. I've given this talk to my children several times. They go off to college. There's a million things you have to work out. I had one of my kids, they couldn't even figure out, they hadn't figured out two roommates and then they shared a bathroom. Well, they couldn't even figure out how to make sure toilet paper was adequately available. And, you know, I give them this lecture, but there's a million things, right? Is your roommate, are you going to agree on common times when things are quiet so you can maybe study? How many people are allowed in your dorm at a time? Is it one person? Is it 30 people? You know, is your dorm room the party room for the floor, or not at all? Or how long can visitors stay? Can they stay overnight? Can they stay for 3 weeks? And you know, there's just so many of these caught up in. And then look at food, right? So if you buy something and it's your roommate's in the refrigerator. I don't know if you'll have a corporate fridge or something like that here. You know, does anyone's lunch ever disappear, or does your soda ever disappear? A guy's done an interesting study where he puts dollar bills in a refrigerator, right? No one will ever take a dollar bill, but you put a random Coca-Cola in there, and that thing will disappear, you know, within just a few days. But you know, if you eat your roommate's food, is that okay? Is it okay? Do you have to replace it? Do you have to report it? You know, all of that is just needs to be discussed if you're going to have an ideal human interaction with someone else that you are living with or working with, or you know, their clients and so forth. Let's see. I know I'm getting toward the end of time. How are we doing for time? Okay. Do you have time for a 3-minute clip and an exercise?
10 minutes total, probably.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you all a chance to practice this. How about that? And so I've actually written an article using the television show Seinfeld, because I think this TV show does a masterful job of making explicit people's expectations and assumptions. In fact, when the TV show first came out, I had a couple of friends say, "Oh, you got to watch this show. It's a great show." So I watched it a couple of times, like, I don't get it. This is like boring and mundane. And then finally, what dawned on me is that I think they are experts at articulating the psychological contract. They do it in the social side. And if you're familiar with Howard Gardner's work on multiple intelligences, he actually was Jerry Seinfeld as a genius in the area of social intelligence. So, you know, every episode, if you're familiar with the show at all, every episode literally has some issue that they discuss. Like my friends and I, we have these same issues, but we never talk about them. They get down to the nitty-gritty of if you've dated somebody for three times, you know, what is your obligation to them? You know, do you have to care for them if they go into the hospital? Or you know, how many dates can you have with someone before you owe them a face-to-face breakup? You know, nowadays the kids, they just text, right? We're through. Or they change their relationship status on Facebook. Like, right, I was in a relationship, all of a sudden you look up your girlfriend and she's not in a relationship anymore. You're like, oh man, I didn't see that coming. So what I want to do is I've got a 3-minute clip from Seinfeld. So I'm going to show you the clip, and you have homework. I know a lot of you don't have something to write, so you're going to have to remember this. There are at least 10 expectations and assumptions made in this 3-minute clip. So see how many of them you can spot. So this will start to tune your radar for what it's like to be on the lookout for expectations and assumptions. All right. If you're not familiar with the show, the main characters are Allyn. She plays a big role. George Costanza. The fourth character is really not in this clip so much. His name is Kramer, and this guy is a one-off person on the show. He's a pilot, so he has a significant role in this particular episode.
Hi, Greg.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah. Well, actually, today was the first day I worked out since the Central Park mini marathon.
You ran the mini marathon?
No, but I exercised that day.
Well, I gotta take off.
Yeah, I guess as an airline pilot, you're one of the few people who can say that and mean it. Do you have the time?
11:30.
11:30?
Wait. 10:30. Sorry.
Oh.
You have to be somewhere?
No.
Then what are you doing?
I'm just waiting for my friend George. We worked out together.
Oh. Well, it's good seeing you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. All right, listen to this. Remember that guy I was telling you about at the health club?
The fly boy.
Yes.
Hey, where's George? I thought he was with you.
I waited. He didn't show up. Anyway, this guy gave me an open lip kiss.
So?
So, we've always just kind of pecked. This one had a totally different dynamic.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, his upper lip landed flush on my upper lip, but his lower lip landed well below my rib.
Moisture?
Yeah, definite moisture.
It's an open lip kiss, all right.
Yeah. Listen, I need to give me a big signal. I mean, maybe he wants to change our relationship.
I'm glad you're here. This could get really boring. You know where I could get some good olives?
I can find out.
Would you?
Oh, a project. That's a definite signal.
You know, by the way, you look really great in that leotard.
Thanks. That's no signal. Who wouldn't like me in this leotard? I look amazing in this leotard.
Hey, you know what's weird? I think I had a dream about you last night.
Okay, he open lips me, he dreams about me, we have an olive project, that's it. I'm asking this guy out. You know, Greg,
I have a sip of your water.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Oh, my God.
I'm sorry, what was it?
It was nothing. Yeah.
They could kick me out of the house club if he tells them.
Oh, what do you want me to do?
Talk to him.
How can I do that?
You said the guy gave you an open lip kiss.
Yes, but then he wiped his hand on the top of the bottle when I offered him water.
That doesn't mean anything.
Are you kidding? That's very significant. If he was interested in me, he'd want my germs. He just craved my germs.
That's right, George. Bottle wipe is big.
What about the open lip kiss?
Bottle wipe supersedes it.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, I'll be off in a second.
Hi. I got the machine next time.
It's all yours. What happened? Did he bring it up?
Never mind that. Look at the signal I just got.
Signal? What signal?
Look it. He knew I was going to use the machine next. He didn't wipe his sweat off. That's a gesture of intimacy.
I'll tell you what that is. That's a violation of club rules. Now I got him, and you're my witness.
You're really working up quite a sweat today, huh?
Yeah. Oh, there's the manager. Good. I think I'm going to talk to her about that guy. You know, we cannot have people like that in here.
Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah, he's disgusting. Besides, I'll take any chance I can to talk to her.
Oh, you're interested in her?
Very.
Oh.
All right. Better cancel that out or we'll get another video.
Oh, I know. I'm so sorry. It's so fast.
So, I hope you got your list of 10. There's one huge mistake. You know, the Seinfeld show, as I said, they really get in there and talk about nitty-gritty things like, if you didn't know this before you came here, Jerry Seinfeld, being an expert, he's confirmed that, the bottle wipe superseded the open mouth kiss, right? So a lot of people didn't know that when you came here today. So that comes from the genius of social intelligence. There's one key mistake made throughout that whole video by Allyn. Anyone who's probably what that is? Yeah, she thought the guy that was into her, but who does she have all of that conversation with? Her friends, right? Does she ever go, how about if the guy gives her the open lip kiss and she says, wow, that was a different kiss than you've ever given me before? All she had to do was say that, probably. That was started the conversation about expectation and assumption. But instead, she runs off and talks to all of her friends, and in your case, coworkers probably, oh my gosh, this is what was said, and what do you think it means? I took it, I had a boss at one point where we had gotten into such odds with each other that he walked by my office one day and said good morning. Someone else was in my office. What do you think he meant by that? Did you hear that? That's how we can become. So what were some of real quickly, and then we'll go back to work. What were some of the assumptions that you all spotted, expectations and assumptions? Yeah. Now see, that's a good example of how people differ, right? My wife would be like, shared sweat, that's not a gesture of intimacy, that's disgusting. Right? But she thought that was a gesture of intimacy. A couple others real quick. Mm-hmm.
That she was random in your
Okay. Yeah, it was just an anchor day point for her, not the fact that she did it. You had the sequence in there about he dreamed about her, right? Said that she looked good in the leotard. And what was the third one? Olive project, right? So if you have a project, she interprets that as a good sign that the relationship is going to become romantic. Of course, she didn't talk to the person that really mattered in this situation, so all of those expectations she had were kind of off target. So two important learnings, and I'll leave this as a challenge with you all. Make sure you're having those conversations around expectations and assumptions, because if you take it just a notch higher than you are today, you'll probably avoid some conflicts and disconnects that you might be experiencing. And make sure you're having it with the person that you need to be having it with, not your coworkers, your friends, going home at night, complaining and interpreting and trying to read the tea leaves. So thank you all for your attention today, and it's been my honor and privilege to be with you.
For all those that have called in, thank you guys for calling in. Hopefully there were no connection issues. The presentation has been recorded. Sometime probably give us about a week. It'll be on Allyn e-learning as well, so anybody that this time didn't work, they can see it as well. And again, thank you, Dr. Dent, for being here with us today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Now we can really... Oh, yeah. I think we had some LinkedIn or something conversation. I was telling you how much I appreciated Bethany. And, she's the one that I met first and allowed us to kind of come in and do some study into your company and the great integration of ethics that you have with the work that you all are doing. Oh, no problem. Well, it's just kind of you to be here at all.